You were not born with a script. No one arrives in this world knowing who they are supposed to be. But soon after your first breath, the world begins to whisper. Then it begins to shout. Expectations, rules, conditions. A subtle voice tells you that who you truly are is too much or not enough. And so you learn to perform. You learn to suppress. You build a mask not out of vanity, but out of fear. This is the moment the false self begins to grow. The false self is not a lie you tell others. It is a lie you tell yourself so convincingly that you forget you are pretending. You wear smiles that are not yours. You pursue dreams that do not belong to you. You silence your anger and disguise your longing until you no longer recognize the voice inside you. Nietzsche understood this better than anyone. He saw the tragedy of the human being not in failure, but in conformity, in abandoning the will to become oneself in exchange for the safety of imitation. He called out the herd mentality, not because he despised people, but because he believed we were capable of more, but only if we had the courage to kill what was false inside us. You confuse approval with love. You confuse success with meaning. You confuse obedience with virtue. And so you live a life that pleases everyone but yourself. You spend your days chasing validation and your nights wondering why everything feels hollow. The false self is a prison built out of applause. Every time you say yes when you mean no. Every time you nod while your soul recoils. Every time you smile for acceptance while you are quietly dying inside. You are feeding the false self. And every time you do, the real you retreats further into the shadows. This is not sustainable. Not because it will break the world, but because it will break you. Nietzsche said that the one who has a why can endure anyhow, but you have no why of your own. You inherited someone else's. You borrowed it to survive. But now it suffocates you. Killing the false self is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of resurrection. It is not about destroying who you are. It is about removing everything you never were. It is about burning the mask so that your real face can feel the air again. This is the beginning of that fire. There is a moment in your life you likely don't remember. Not because it lacked importance, but because it marked the beginning of a quiet tragedy. It was the moment you first learned that being yourself was not safe. You might have cried too loudly, asked too many questions, expressed too much emotion, and in return you were met with punishment, rejection, or cold indifference. That moment planted the first seed of your false self, the mask, the performance, the betrayal. The false self is not something you chose consciously. It grew out of your need to survive, out of your deep desire to be accepted, to be loved, to avoid pain. So you watched, you listened, you learned what made others happy, what gained their approval, what kept you safe. And slowly you began to mold yourself to fit those expectations. You became polite when you wanted to scream. You smiled when you felt dead inside. You excelled at things you didn't care about. And as time passed, you forgot there was ever another way. Nietzsche understood this deeply. He wrote of the herd morality, the unconscious collective pressure that shapes us into obedient, predictable creatures. To live according to others' values is to betray the one thing that makes you unique. Your will, your individuality, your power to choose your own meaning. But instead of rising to that challenge, most people submit. They choose comfort over truth, belonging over authenticity, and in doing so, they create a self that is easy to manage, easy to accept, but completely false. You begin to play a role. Maybe you are the responsible one, the funny one, the strong one, the one who never complains. Whatever mask you wear, it becomes fused to your identity. And the longer you wear it, the more you forget it's a mask at all. The real you, the chaotic and vibrant self buried underneath, starts to decay from neglect. And still, you go on pretending. Because it works, because it keeps the peace, because you are afraid. But the false self has a cost, and that cost is your aliveness. You begin to feel empty in rooms full of people. You start to hate your own voice. You wake up and feel like you're living someone else's life. That is the soul's way of warning you. The mask is suffocating you. The false self may have helped you survive, but now it is keeping you from truly living. Nietzsche said, "Become who you are." But to do that, you must first realize you are not who you pretend to be. You must see the mask clearly. And then you must be willing to tear it off. That is the beginning of transformation, not through external change, but through the painful honesty of facing who you've become and who you were meant to be. In the next chapter, we will confront the mirror, the terrifying, liberating mirror of truth. Are you ready to look? There is a reason so many people fear solitude, not because of the silence, but because of what the silence reveals. When the distractions fade and the world quiets down, something terrifying emerges. Yourself. Not the self you show the world, but the one you've buried. And in that moment, the mirror appears. A mirror that does not flatter. A mirror that does not lie. And if you're brave enough to look, it will shatter every illusion you've built. The mirror of truth is not a physical object. It's a psychological experience, a confrontation with your inner reality. And it's brutal, because it shows you everything. The lies you've told yourself, the dreams you abandoned, the pain you never processed, the shame you've tried to hide beneath success, humor, productivity. It brings it all to the surface. Nietzsche spoke of the necessity of confronting our inner chaos. One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. But that chaos is precisely what the false self is designed to avoid. You were taught to fear your flaws, to numb your wounds, to reject your imperfections. And so you built a self that is polished, curated, marketable, but ultimately hollow. The mirror reveals that hollowness, and yet most people turn away. They go back to scrolling, consuming, performing, because the truth is too heavy. But here's what they don't understand. The mirror is not your enemy. It is your only path to freedom. To look into the mirror is to take responsibility. To stop blaming the world for your emptiness. To stop waiting for others to fix what only you can confront. It's about ownership of your darkness, your choices, your potential. And when you do look, really look, something miraculous happens. You begin to separate what is true from what is performance. You begin to feel again. Not just the pain, but also the possibility. You remember what it feels like to be real. This process is not graceful. It's messy. It will break you before it rebuilds you. But that's the point. The mirror doesn't show you who you are. It shows you everything you are not, so that you can finally begin to become who you are. Looking into the mirror is the most courageous act a human can commit. Because it demands the death of who you think you are. but it is also the birthplace of who you were always meant to be. In the next chapter, we will talk about what it means to break free, not just from others, but from the prison you've built inside yourself. The mask has cracked. The truth has been seen. Now comes the hardest part, liberation. Most prisons are not made of bars. They're built from stories. Stories you tell yourself about who you are, what you can do, and what you deserve. You carry the keys to your own freedom, but instead of using them, you tighten the chains. You rehearse old narratives. You stay loyal to suffering. You mistake routine for safety. But there comes a moment, if you're lucky or desperate enough, when you stop waiting for someone to save you. And you realize no one is coming. This chapter is about what happens next. The inner prison is built slowly, piece by piece. A rejection here, a disappointment there, a shameful moment that never healed, and each one becomes a brick in the walls you build around yourself. At first, it feels like protection. Over time, it becomes confinement. Nietzsche warned us about this, that our greatest enemy is not society or even others, but the part of ourselves that submits without questioning, the part that seeks approval over truth, that would rather be accepted than be free. That's the false self, and it's a master builder of cages. But how do you escape a prison you can't see? You begin by challenging the beliefs that hold it together. I can't speak up. I'm not good enough. If I show my real self, I'll be rejected. Each of these beliefs is a lock, and every time you question one, you jiggle the key. Freedom doesn't come all at once. It arrives in small acts of rebellion, saying no when you used to say yes, sitting with discomfort instead of running from it, telling the truth when lying would be easier. These moments seem small, but they are sacred because they chip away at the walls you've built. It's not easy. The mind will resist. The body will react. Fear will scream louder than ever because the ego doesn't want to die. The false self will fight to survive. It will tell you freedom is dangerous, that truth will cost you everything. And in a way, it's right. Real freedom will cost you the identity that kept you safe, but only on the surface. You will lose things. You might lose people. You might lose the life you thought you were supposed to live. But what you gain in return is priceless. The ability to breathe fully. To act from truth, not fear. To build a life not from what others expect, but from who you truly are. Escaping the inner prison is not a single event. It is a daily commitment to choose honesty over comfort, truth over approval, self-respect over self-betrayal. The bars may still be there. The old thoughts might still echo, but each time you act with courage, they lose their power. In the final chapter, we will explore what it means to live after the escape. Not just to survive, but to create a life that is worth your pain, your truth, and your rebirth. The false self is dying. The real you is being born. What happens after the false self dies? After you've burned the masks, rejected the scripts, and walked out of the mental cage you once called me? Most people think freedom is the end, the grand finale. But it isn't. It's the beginning, and not the easy kind. Because freedom doesn't just ask for space, it demands responsibility. This chapter is about what comes after the escape, and why the real challenge begins the moment you stop pretending. When the false self collapses, you're left with something unfamiliar. Yourself. And that's terrifying. Because now there's no one left to blame. No more roles to play, no more excuses to hide behind. What's left is a mirror and a choice. This is the moment where many retreat. They go back to comfort, back to the performance. But you, if you've made it this far, you know too much. You can't unknow the truth. You've seen what the lie costs you, and now you're ready to live differently. But how? It starts with ownership. Every decision you make from now on must come from awareness. You no longer act to impress or to escape. You act because it's aligned with your values, with your soul. That's the difference between living unconsciously and living intentionally. Nietzsche called this process becoming who you are, not inventing, not copying, becoming. It's a peeling back, not a layering on. And it requires brutal honesty about what you want, what you fear, and what you refuse to tolerate any longer. You begin building a life from truth. You choose work that reflects your passions, not your fears. You form relationships that nourish, not numb. You speak in your real voice, not the voice you were trained to use. Each choice may be small, but together they shape an existence that reflects something real. But beware, the world doesn't always reward authenticity. People might misunderstand you. They might resist your growth, especially if it challenges their comfort. But you didn't come this far to be understood. You came to be free. And freedom sometimes looks like solitude. Sometimes it looks like loss. But beneath all that, it feels like peace. And here's the most beautiful part. When you live from truth, you give others permission to do the same. You stop being a mirror for the lie and start becoming a signal for what's possible. That's how change spreads, not from shouting, but from embodying. Living beyond the illusion is not about perfection. It's about integrity. It's waking up each day and choosing to be real, even when it's hard. It's staying awake in a world that numbs. It's leading yourself, not following the crowd. And when you fall, because you will, it's rising not with shame, but with wisdom. This is your life now, unfiltered, unmasked, unapologetic. And no, it won't be easy, but it will be yours, and that is worth everything.